to my booktube channel. This video is going to be my Geekly wrap-up for the week of May 4th through May 10th. This week I read 2 plays, 4 books, and I played 4 board games. I'm also filming again at night because that's just the way things are right now with both myself and my husband working from home. So let's go ahead and get into the books that I read. I think in a channel first, actually. Everything that I read this week was actually digital in some way. Either it was an ebook or an audiobook or something like that, but I don't think that's ever happened before in this channel, so that's kind of neat. So the first 2 things that I read were actually 2 plays that I read for Moliere May, which is a read-along where we are reading a bunch of different plays by the French playwright Moliere, and it's hosted by Fariba at the Francophile Reader, so I'll go ahead and leave her channel information linked if you want to find out more about that. But the 2 plays that I read for that were The Bourgeois Gentleman and Tartuffe, which is also called The Hypocrite. These are both plays that were written for like the court of the French king at the time, and that explore through satire and just like poking fun at the various like foibles of people at different levels of French society. I'm learning a lot about that and about that like particular set of literary conventions that I didn't know before from reading these plays, and I'm really enjoying the discussion that's happening alongside it all on the Goodreads group. So that's that. I also finished, I finished The Raven Cycle by Maggie Stiefvater this week. I finished The Raven King, which I listened to as an audiobook. And kind of similar to my feelings about the 3rd book, Blue Lily Lily Blue, I didn't like it as much as I liked the first 2. I thought it was a fine conclusion to the trilogy, but it did feel like there were a lot of plot twists and major reveals that were saved until the very end, and it did kind of result in the entire story wrapping up really quickly. I definitely looked down at the book and I was like, how are they going to get all of this done in like the last 30 minutes of the audiobook? So I ended up giving it 3 out of 5 stars because while it was good, it just didn't quite hit the high levels of the 1st and 2nd books for me. And yeah, it was a very intense ride all the way through to the end. Still can't believe I managed to get all the way there without having anything spoiled for me, but whew, now it's gonna be fun when I can go back and like watch all of the reading vlogs of booktubers that I like who are reading The Raven Cycle, because I've avoided all of those to get rid of spoilers. Okay, and then let's see. Okay, I read a novella for the Asian Readathon, which was The Empress of Salt and Fortune by Yi Vo. This is a really interesting, sort of strange fantasy novella, and I really enjoyed this. It reminded me a lot of what I love about J.Y. Yang's novellas. It reminded me a lot of what I love about Nnedi Okorafor. Just some other authors that I really enjoy. This read as very similar to, or it hit like a very similar chord with me. And this is about a young queer chronicler who uses they, them pronouns that is writing down the story of this Empress of Salt and Fortune and her lover, I guess, basically. And how they have known each other for their whole lives, and the truth of their stories is just now coming out. It's really hard to like explain what this book is about because so much of the beauty of the book comes across in the way that it's written and not necessarily in, you know, a straightforward plot, but more in the gradual unfolding of a story. It's kind of like watching a flower open slowly. Like, it's not necessarily a linear progression from point A to point B. It's just a really beautiful experience to get to watch from start to finish. So I'd highly recommend that. I think I said this already, but I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I also read another 5-star book this week, which was The Only Black Girls in Town by Brandy Colbert. This is her first middle grade novel, and I absolutely adored this book. This was about a girl named, oh gosh, I can remember everybody's name except for the main character's name right now. Alberta, that's right. Her name is Alberta, and she lives in this beach town in California where she and her 2 dads are the only black family on their street. So when another black family moves in across the street, she gets really excited because she's looking forward to being able to make a new friend with their daughter who is about her age, and, you know, just have sort of like that where they can make friends without necessarily having to explain race to the other person in the course of their friendship. And so it deals with these sort of typical stories of like middle school girls, friendships changing, some friends feeling like they're getting left behind as other people are quote unquote growing up faster than others. And so Alberta and the new girl Edie end up finding a box full of these old journals from the 1950s and 60s in the attic of the house that Edie and her mom move into. And as they read through the journals, they begin to uncover the mystery of somebody who wrote those journals. And what they discover is that the woman who wrote the journals was a Black woman from the South who was passing for white in the 1950s and 1960s in order to escape the sort of Jim Crow era racism and have better economic opportunities and stuff like that when she moved to California. So it's kind of, on the one level, a story that is about these girls as they are navigating the changing worlds of like middle school friendships and stuff. But it's also a lot about like this particular period of Black history and the kinds of, it really unpacks the concept of passing privilege, I guess I'll say, because it in some ways means that you are not targeted for your race, but also it talks about the downsides of having to hide a part of yourself that you are inherently proud of, but that the world dislikes, and what that does to you as a person that is trying to suppress that identity that you can't take away. I thought that this book was fantastic. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I think it would be great for anybody to read, not just kids that are in that middle grade reading group or reading age group. I also read The Blackbird Girls by Anne Blankman, and this is another middle grade story that is about 2 girls, Oksana and Valentina, who are growing up in Ukraine right around the time of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Valentina's family is Jewish, and as such, she knows that she has to work twice as hard in order to do well in school and get accepted into a university because she dreams of becoming an inventor. And Oksana's family are actually really anti-Semitic, or at least her dad is. So it starts out where the girls know each other at school, but Oksana bullies Valentina all the time and is constantly like putting her down with all this demeaning stuff, this really anti-Semitic insults. And the 2 girls end up being put together on an evacuation because when the Chernobyl nuclear disaster happens, they have to leave the town that they grew up in, and they have to learn to get along with each other and learn things about each other. Valentina, at the same time that the 2 girls are being sent away, they are going to stay with Valentina's grandmother, whom she's never met. This is because her grandmother has been secretly practicing and keeping alive her family's Judaism in the USSR, even though it's against the law. So Valentina's mom had moved the family away from the grandmother so that they didn't, incur any suspicion and get the secret police brought down on their heads. So now Valentina is finding out her grandmother's secret, and she's becoming more interested in this part of her family's history and heritage because this is something that her grandmother held on to throughout the World War II years and is continuing to do that during the Cold War. And then this book is also a lot about the friendships between girls. The reason why I gave it, though, 4 out of 5 stars is that it definitely felt a lot like, at times it felt a lot like an adult writing about relationships between children. It didn't feel like that was coming from the characters themselves, if that makes sense. It was maybe less authentic in terms of what I think of as like a child's voice and like how children talk to each other and relate to each other. So that was kind of a pitfall for me. And I also stories kind of rub me the wrong way about people that befriend bullies that are terrible to them. Like, this one was fine because it ended up being the case that like Oksana is being abused at home by her parents, and so that also like comes with some trigger warnings for descriptions of parental abuse and also anti-Semitism. As I mentioned, there's a lot of that in the book as well when Oksana is bullying Valentina. So sometimes I feel kind of weird about reading books where the bully and the person that they're bullying have to become friends. I think it worked in this case, but that's just something that, I don't know, sits a little bit weird with me. But I don't think that this book was very like victim blamey or anything like that. It did do a good job of making both of the characters complex, and of Oksana having this moment realizing that like she needed to stop taking out what was going on with her on other people and move toward a place where she could heal from that. So that book was good. We also played 4 different board games. I'll go through these pretty quickly since I've talked about them already before on my channel. The first one of those was Railroad Inc., which is a very simple roll and write game. It's a puzzle game where you are trying to build long railroads and roads on this little grid-sized map, and then you score points based off of how well you connect the road segments that you are given. Very simple, basic, and relaxing. We also played Paladins of the West Kingdom, which is the successor to Architects of the West Kingdom, the game that I played 5 times in a row last week. This is a different game, but it takes place in sort of the same universe, although instead of the events taking place in a single town, the events take place sort of all over the map in the Middle Ages. I just feel like I'm still involved in the learning curve of this game. I definitely haven't mastered it yet. I think I'm getting better at it, but I definitely haven't quite clicked with like what all the good strategies are and the things that I need to be doing. And then we also played, kind of appropriate for our times, we played Pandemic and Pandemic Rising Tide. It had been ages since I had played Vanilla Pandemic, but we had a friend who, from a safe social distance, of course, asked us if he could try out playing some new board games with us, and we were like, okay, Pandemic, that's good, that has lots of, online support, we can teach it to you, it'll be great. So we taught him how to play Pandemic, and then he liked it so much that we were like, well, there are lots of other different Pandemics you can play, hence Rising Tide. So that is going to be it for this week's Geekly wrap-up. If you like this video and you'd like to see more of what I do, go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. That way you get updates every time I post a new video. As always, thank you all so very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!